This is my third video just to give some background and information on my new book, Finding Life After Death, a Biblical Survivor's Guide. The reality is this: people are hurting, and Christians are not immune. In Finding Life After Death, I acknowledge that loss is painful. Grief is real. The second section of the book seeks to provide biblical guidance to navigating pain. In the 3 chapters, I acknowledge that the reality of grief and loss is that it's painful. When I went through deep grief, it felt like the most real time of my life. Every second, every minute, every hour, there was tangible pain that I was experiencing. I came to call it my 6th sense. It was a 6th sense, and when you're going through deep grief, it's the sense that dominates every other sense. It seems to infiltrate your sense of smell, of sight, of touch, etc., in such a way that the world looks and feels different. One person I reference in the book is Bono, the lead singer and songwriter for U2. He a couple of years ago wrote his own autobiography called Surrender, and in a lot of the book he reflects on his own loss. His mum died when he was 14 of a brain aneurysm, exactly the same thing that took my own wife in 2016. And one simple sentence that he wrote in the book struck a chord with me. He says this: "Isn't it true that we turn the world into the shape of our pain?" Isn't it true that we turn the world into the shape of our pain? The pain of loss is real. And if you're watching this and you're going through deep pain right now, I want to just acknowledge that there are no words that can compensate. There are no words that can alleviate the pain. And that's not what I'm trying to do in the book. Rather, I'm simply seeking to acknowledge that the pain is real. The pain was never God's intention, and yet the Bible is realistic in acknowledging that pain can be all-encompassing. See, the authors of the Bible didn't avoid talking about their pain. Rather, what they avoided was giving cliches or pat answers or greeting card responses to pain. The Bible grapples with the problem of pain, and this is probably most apparent in the Psalms. In the book, I write the following: "Death is painful for those that remain. No matter how we try to explain it, rationalize it, or theologize about it, death is painful. And the counsel the Bible provides is that mourning is a righteous and necessary response to death." Yeah, the Bible doesn't predominantly approach the subject of death from a theoretical or philosophical perspective. Rather, many of the biblical passages concerning death are deeply emotional as the authors face the reality of pain, grief, and loss. Death is presented as a nefarious enemy, entirely at odds with God's plans and purposes. And this is what we particularly see in the Psalms, as the psalmists grapple with our vulnerability as mortal humans living in the shadow of death. The Bible's response to pain and loss is that we should lament, we should mourn, we should grieve. Remember the day after my wife passed away in 2016. I was on the rocks overlooking the ocean. We'd been on holiday together when she passed away from her brain aneurysm. And as I was talking to God that day and having a conversation with him in my confusion, in my deep grief, I said to God, I just don't know how I'm going to get through this. But right now I can't turn you into my enemy. I need you to be my ally. I can only get through this if we go through this shoulder to shoulder. And one thing I felt that God dropped into my spirit was this: I now understood why it went dark when Jesus was on Calvary. Because the only response to death of a loved one is to walk through the darkness of grief and loss. God relates to us in that. When he looked upon his Son on the cross, it went dark. And so we can see God as our ally, not our enemy, when we're going through the worst that life can throw at us, when we ourselves are going through deep loss and mourning. It is appropriate that we lament. In the book Finding Life After Death, I don't skirt around how painfully hard it is to walk through the valley of the shadow of death. However, I trust that the book helps point us to the one who is there with us in the valley and whose love is deeper than our deepest pain.